Chapter 3. The most beautiful car in the world. Well, the next day, Jeremy and Jemima had to go off to boarding school, so they never saw the arrival of the new car, or rather, of the ruins of it, as it came bumping and crashing down the lane behind the breakdown lorry. But Mimsy wrote and told them of how it disappeared at once into Commander Pott's workshop, and how their father then locked himself inside with it, and only emerged to eat and sleep. For 3 months, the whole of the summer term, Commander Pott worked and worked secretly on the wreck of the old Paragon, and Mimsy said that much smoke came out of the chimney, and often light shone all night through the windows, and mysterious packages arrived from engineering factories all over England and disappeared into the workshop through the locked doors. Mimsy wrote that their father went through periods of gloom and impatience and frenzy and triumph and dejection and delight and unhappiness and nightmares and loss of appetite, but that gradually, with the passing weeks, he became calmer and happier until, as the holidays came nearer, he was smiling and rubbing his hands. Then at last came the great day when they fetched Jeremy and Jemima from school, and the whole family assembled outside the workshop, while Commander Pott solemnly unlocked the doors, and they all trooped in to where the 12-cylinder, 8-litre supercharged Paragon Panther stood under the bright lights. Mimsy and Jeremy and Jemima stood and stared and stared and stared until Jemima broke the silence and said, "But she's the most beautiful car in the world." Mimsy and Jeremy just nodded their agreement and looked at the Paragon with round and shining eyes. And she was beautiful. Every single little thing had been put right, and every detail gleamed and glinted with new paint and polished chromium, down to the snarling mouth of the big boa constrictor horn. Slowly they walked around her and examined her inch by inch, from the rows and rows of gleaming knobs on the dashboard to the brand new dark red leather upholstery, from the cream-coloured collapsible roof to the fine new tyres, from the glistening silver of the huge exhaust pipes snaking away from holes in the bright green bonnet to the glittering number plates that said Gen 11. And silently they climbed in through the low doors that opened and shut with the most delicious clicks, and Commander Caractus Pott sat behind the huge driving wheel, with Mimsy beside him in her own bucket seat with an armrest, and Jeremy and Jemima got in the back and sank down amongst the big soft red leather cushions and rested their arms on their own armrests between them. Then, without saying anything, Commander Pott leant forward and pressed the big black knob of the self-starter. At first nothing happened. There was just a soft grinding from the starter motor. Jeremy and Jemima looked at each other with round eyes. Wasn't she going to work after all? But then Commander Pott pulled out the silver knob of the choke to feed more petrol into the carburettor and pressed the starter again. And out of the exhaust pipes there came just these 4 noises, very, very loud. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And there was a distinct pause after each noise, and it was like 2 big sneezes and 2 small explosions, and then there was silence. Again Jeremy and Jemima looked at each other, now really rather worried. Had something gone wrong? But Commander Pott just said, "She's a bit cold. Now then." He pressed the starter again, and this time, after the first 2 chitty sneezes and the 2 soft bangs, the bangs ran on and into each other so as to make a delicious purring rumble, such as neither Mimsy nor Jeremy nor Jemima had ever heard before from a piece of machinery. Commander Pott put the big car into gear, and slowly they rumbled and roared out of the workshop into the sunshine and up the lane towards the motorway, and the springs were soft as silk. And always this delicious rumble came out behind the huge fish-tail exhausts. When they got to the side road that joined the motorway, Commander Pott pressed the big bulb of the boa constrictor horn, and it let out a deep, polite, but rather threatening roar. And then, because he wanted to show everything to the children, Commander Pott pressed the electric horn button in the middle of the wheel, and the klaxon horn fired off a terrific blast of a warning, "Ga-ooga!" And then he steered out onto the motorway, and they were off on their first practice run. Well, I can only tell you that the huge, long, gleaming green car almost flew. With a click of the big central gear lever, Commander Pott got out of first gear into second at 40 miles an hour. With another click at 70 miles an hour, he was in third. And as they touched 100 miles an hour, he put the huge car into top gear, and there they were passing the other black Beetle cars, almost as if they were standing still. "Gauga!" went the klaxon again and again as they swept down the big safe double-lane highway, and the drivers of the little family saloons looked in their rear mirrors and saw the great gleaming monster whistling towards them and drew in to the left-hand side to let her go by. And all the drivers said, "Goo, see that? What is she? Smashing!" And then the green car was passing away, and they caught the hurricane howl of the big exhausts and made a note of the number Gen 11. And not one of the drivers noticed that the number really spelt. They just thought it was a nice short number to have and easy to remember. So Chitty Chitty Bang Bang came to the end of the motorway, and Commander Pott carefully swung the big car into the other lane and roared off back towards home. And Jeremy and Jemima clutched their armrests with excitement and looked over that glittering dashboard and watched the needle of the speedometer creep back up to 100 and stay there until they came to the turning off for home. And Commander Pott clamped on the powerful hydraulic brakes until the car was only creeping along, and they turned off the motorway and bumped back down their narrow lane and back in under the bright lights of the workshop. And when Commander Pott switched off the engine, it gave one last chitty chitty and let out a deep sigh of contentment and was silent. They all climbed out, and Commander Pott turned to them with a gleam of triumph in his eye. "Well, what do you think of her?" And Mimsy said, "Terrific!" And Jeremy said, "Smashing!" And Jemima said, "Adorable!" And Commander Caractus Pott said mysteriously, "Well, that's good, but I'm warning you, there's something odd about this car. I've put all I know into her, every invention and improvement I could think of, and quite a lot of the £1,000 we got from the scrumptious people. But there's more to it than that. She's got some ideas of her own." "How do you mean?" they all chorused. "Well," said Commander Pott carefully, "I can't exactly say, but sometimes in the morning, when I come back to get to work again, I'd find that certain modifications, certain changes had, so to speak, taken place all by themselves during the night, when I wasn't there. Certain, what shall I say, rather revolutionary and extraordinary adaptations. I can't say more than that, and I haven't really got to the bottom of it all, but I suspect that this motor car has thought out, all by herself, certain improvements, certain very extraordinary mechanical devices, just as if she had a mind of her own, just as if she were grateful to us for saving her life, so to speak, and wanted to repay all the loving care we've given her. And there's another thing. You see all those rows and rows of knobs and buttons and levers and little lights on the dashboard? Well, to tell you the truth, I just haven't been able to discover what they're all for. I know the obvious ones, of course, but there are some of those gadgets that seem to be secret gadgets. We'll find out what they're for in time, I suppose, but for now I'll admit there are quite a lot of them that have got me really puzzled. She just won't let me find out." "What do you mean?" asked Jemima excitedly. "Is it a she?" "Well," said Commander Pott, "that's how I've come to call her. It's funny, but all bits of machinery that people love are made into females. All ships are she, racing drivers call their cars she. Same thing with aeroplanes. Don't know about rockets or Sputniks. Somehow they don't seem very feminine to me. But I bet the rocketeers and Sputnikators, or whatever they call the Sputnik experts, I bet they call their spaceships and things she. Odd, isn't it? I used to serve in a battleship. Gigantic great ships stuffed with guns and radar and so on, called the George V. But we called her she." Jeremy said excitedly, "We've got to have a name for her, and I know what we ought to call her. What she called herself." "What do you mean?" "What was that?" "When did she?" they all cried together. Jeremy said slowly, "She said it when she started. Chitty, chitty, like sneezes, and then bang, bang. So we'll call her that, her own invented name." And the others looked at each other, and slowly they all smiled, and Commander Caractus Pott patted the green and silver car on her nose, and said in a loud and solemn voice,
Now hear me, 12-cylinder, 8-litre, supercharged Paragon Panther. We hereby christen you," and the old chorus, "Chitty Chitty Bang Bang." Then they trooped out of the workshop and went happily about all the things they'd forgotten to do for the whole of that exciting afternoon.